Okay, let's set the scene. It's 1975. America is in a really weird place. Still reeling from Vietnam, deep in the Cold War, and a lot of people felt like the country was facing a serious moral crisis. And it's right in the middle of all this that Reverend Sun Myung Moon gets up on a stage in New York and gives this speech, framing his mission not as just, a church, but as a full-on guerrilla war for the soul of America.
And right out of the gate, he says something that just sets the stage for everything. This isn't going to be some quiet, gentle sermon. Nope. It's a declaration that the normal way of doing things is off the table. This one sentence tells you that we're about to dive into a radical, totally unconventional strategy for a battle he was convinced was already happening.
So, to really get a handle on this speech, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll start with that call to battle. Then, we'll unpack the crisis he saw happening in America. After that, we'll get into the pretty intense mindset he required from his followers, lay out his actual blueprint for winning, and finally, look at the ultimate weapon he believed would seal the deal. So first things first, let's talk about the framing. Moon presents his movement not as some big established church, but as a small, scrappy army, totally surrounded by a massive enemy. The only way they could possibly survive, let alone win, was to fight a different kind of war.
And that brings us to the core idea of the entire speech, guerrilla warfare. Think about it. He's saying, look, we're outnumbered, we're outgunned, so we can't fight them head on. Instead, they had to be like guerrilla fighters, fast, unpredictable, and totally willing to do things that look, well, peculiar to everybody else, all to hit the enemy where they're weakest.
So you have to ask, right? What was this crisis that was so bad it needed such an extreme response? Well, Moon paints this incredibly specific and frankly terrifying picture of a nation that he believed was being eaten alive from the inside.
And he doesn't mince words about who the enemy is: international communism. But, and this is key, he argued their strategy wasn't about tanks and missiles. No, it was a cultural war, a spiritual attack, designed to make the country's foundations so rotten that it would just collapse on its own.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because he gets super specific. He lays out this 3-pronged attack. First, you go after Christianity, the nation's core ideology. Second, you corrupt the young people. And third, you shatter the family, which is the basic building block of society. He saw these not as random problems, but as deliberate, strategic moves. And he's not just talking in generalities. To prove his point, he pulls out a stat. He points to California, claiming the divorce rate was actually higher than the marriage rate. And for him, that was Exhibit A, that the attack on the family was already working. Wow. And when he talks about that second prong, corrupting the youth, the language gets even more intense. He claims there was a deliberate strategy by Red China to flood the West with drugs like LSD and heroin. And to show just how bad it was, he said that 92% of his own church members were former drug users. To him, this wasn't just a social problem, it was a massacre.
So, where were America's leaders in all this? According to the speech, they were completely useless. He describes senators and congressmen as just floating along on the current, more worried about their careers than the country's survival, totally powerless to do anything. And that just drives home his point that some new outside force was desperately needed.
Okay, so that brings us to the mindset. If the problem is that bad and the leadership has totally failed, what kind of person does it take to fight back? Well, Moon outlines this extreme internal discipline that is just worlds away from your average person. He paints this really stark picture, right? The common person, they need their 8 hours of sleep, they complain when things get hard. But the guerrilla fighter, they literally erase the word impossible from their dictionary. They don't see difficulty as a problem. They see it as a challenge that actually gets them fired up. They're willing to be whoever they need to be to get the job done.
And to really hammer this point home, he uses these incredibly vivid, almost jarring examples. He tells his followers that if the mission requires it, they have to be brave enough to overcome their own physical bodies. The demand here is for a level of commitment that just goes beyond personal comfort, beyond identity, beyond all normal rules.
So we've got the problem and we've got the mindset. What's the actual game plan? The speech lays out a really clear bottom-up strategy. Victory isn't some big thing that happens way off in the future. It's a process that you build, piece by piece, starting right now. And here's the path he lays out. It all starts with you, the individual, in every single moment. Once you've got that down, it scales up to the family, then to the church,
And only after you've secured victory on those core levels can the mission even think about expanding to change society, the nation, and yeah, the entire world.
Level 1 is the absolute foundation of everything. Individual victory means you get your own mind and body on the same page. It's a constant battle every single moment against your own laziness, your own temptations. If you can't win that war inside yourself, you've got no shot at winning anything else. So, once an individual has got that down, they can build a victorious family. And the unified couple isn't just about being happy together. Its real purpose is to become a lighthouse in a storm, a perfect, unbreakable example of unity that can act as a stronghold and help heal other broken families.
And the third level is the church. This is where that ideal of unity gets put to the test. It's like a laboratory for creating one big family out of people from every possible background, every race, every nationality you can think of. The idea is, if this incredibly diverse group can achieve perfect unity, it's proof that the model can work for the whole world. And this all leads up to what he calls the ultimate weapon in this whole spiritual war. And it's not a book. It's not a political idea. It's the living, breathing example of unity itself. And this, according to the speech, is why America is the most important battlefield. Because it's this melting pot of races, white, black, and yellow, as he puts it. It's the perfect place to actually create one family under God. If these different races can truly unite in love inside the movement, it creates a powerful new reality that the world can't ignore. And get this, because this is positioned as a direct counterattack to communism. The communist method, he says, is all about exploiting differences, race, class, to create struggle and make society collapse. The unification method is the polar opposite. Use divine love to bind people together, create one family, and bring about restoration and unity. It's like a form of ideological judo. So when you boil it all down, the single most important idea in this entire speech is this. Victory is not some far-off goal. It's a boundary point. It is a line in the sand that you either crossed or you don't in every single thing you do. In every thought, every action, the war is won or lost right here, right now. You know, in breaking all this down, we've really seen a whole worldview where a national crisis calls for a spiritual guerrilla war fought by people who have literally deleted the word impossible from their minds. It really leaves you with a pretty big question. In times of huge uncertainty, when things feel like they're falling apart, what does a speech like this tell us about the incredible power of a belief system that gives you a clear enemy, a radical new identity, and a total plan for victory?